live? Okay. Okay, we're gonna get started. Hello, everybody. Welcome to day three, concurrent session 3B, Environmental Justice Issues in Washington, D.C. My name is Ariel Wharton. I'm a climate change specialist within SIEGE for the School of Public Health at the University of Maryland. And today we have a distinguished panel, I should say, of speakers. First up, we have Sabrina Rhodes of ANC. She's the vice chair for Ward 5, community organizer of Empower DC Ivy City residents. We also have Rhonda Hamilton, ANC, and Narak near Buzzard Point Resilient Action Committee, Ward 6. Again, another speaker we have is Fraser Walton, attorney and advocate for the Anacostia River. We also have Brenda Richardson, coordinator for Anacostia Parks and Community Collaborative, and president of Chosen Consulting LLC. And we, last but not least, we have Nathan Harrington, executive director, Ward 8 Woods. Welcome, panelists. We are so happy to have you here to speak on such a pressing issues, I should say, within the DC area. I would like you to, at this moment, introduce yourselves. So why don't we start on my end, please?
Yes, thanks for having me. Again,
So sorry about that. Yes. Shout it out. It's on, yes.
Hello.
Yes,
Okay, thank
we hear
you.
you.
My name is Sabrina Rhodes. As she said, I'm the vice chair of ANC 5DO2, which represents Ivy City. I'm a native Washingtonian, and I am a community organizer with Empower DC in Ivy City. So not only do I work in Ivy City, I live there too, and I'm there every day and I see what's going on. But thanks for having me, and I look forward to talking with everyone.
Good afternoon. I'm Nathan Harrington. I was born in DC, but grew up in Rockville, Maryland, and I've lived in Congress Heights in Ward 8 for 14 years. And in 2018, I started the Ward 8 Woods Conservancy. We work to improve the health, beauty, public access, and enjoyment of the forested public lands east of the river.
Thank you. My name is Fraser Walton Jr., and I'm with the Kingman Park Civic Association, and that's the community that's out near RFK Stadium in Washington and the National Guard Armory. And I'm president of the Kingman Park Civic Association, which has been in existence since 1928. It came with the neighborhood. And I'm also on the board of the Sumter School Museum in DC, and that is the museum that is the official museum for the DC public school system. They do have a museum, and I invite you to visit. September 21st, we have an open house, no charge at all, and we're having our 150th celebration. Thank you.
Brenda or Rhonda?
Hi, everybody. I'm Brenda Richardson. I'm the coordinator of the Anacostia Parks and Community Collaborative. I live and work in Ward 7, and our goal is to get more folks in our parks and on the Anacostia River in Ward 7 and Ward 8. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Rhonda Hamilton. As she said, I'm an ANC commissioner in Southwest. I represent the area that's considered Old Southwest, and I'm part of near Buzzard Point and Buzzard Point community. I'm also the president for Syfax Gardens Resident Council and a environmental advocate and community organizer that has been working to raise the awareness for the environmental impacts and concerns and the health consequences that we've had to absorb because of the redevelopment of Buzzard Point and the existing contaminants within that area.
Thank you so much. Thank you, panelists. I'm going to jump right into these questions. As this is an EJ symposium, it is only fitting that we ask how did you become engaged in environmental justice, and what does environmental justice mean to you?
Well,
Yeah, that's fine.
well, we've been working in Ivy City to have Cremel open. Cremel has been closed since the 70s, which is an environmental justice issue. They wanted to put the overflow buses from Union Station there. They wanted to put a dump across the street when the children were in the school. This was back in the day. And they wanted to run a highway through the neighborhood. So once I found out about the chemical plant that Parisa spoke about earlier, that's been operating since the 30s in our community, on top of a lot of the businesses that's in our community, that threw up my antennas. And I have grandchildren. There are children that's playing in the community that has to breathe these toxins and pollutants, and the city isn't doing anything about it. And then once I became ANC commissioner, I realized that politically, nobody is caring for our communities, especially Black and Brown communities, and that's across the board. They really don't care about us, so we have to be in position to take over and make sure and make them care and demand that they do right by our communities. So basically, that's what environmental justice mean to me: fighting to breathe, fighting for our lives, fighting for our children, fighting for our future, and just fighting to live every day.
Yes. Again, my name is Fraser Walton, and my involvement in EJ began as a child. My father worked for DC Water and Sewer, and as a truck driver. And when I was about 7, we used to fish in the Anacostia River, and children used to swim in the Anacostia River. I know that, so you figure I must be 100 years old. But in reality, my father told me at an early age we could no longer do that because of the pollution in the Anacostia. And when they built RFK Stadium was completed in 1960. And they put in new stormwater drains, large stormwater drains, and to catch raw sewage. When it rained, approximately 2 inches, you would have combined sewage overflow into the river. And so as a result, I've been working with it since then. Left home and came back home, and the problem just got worse. So, but here's the good part. When we grew up, you didn't have the problem with crime, and that's where I wanted to focus, the problem with crime, because that's an environmental issue, and there are solutions to it, and the police can't do it alone. The city government has failed at its job, and in the operation of government. And I say that regretfully, because the city, and this is throughout every city in America, has shut down vocational and trade schools. And it's happened in every city in the country. Now, this is a coincidence that's gone on everywhere. And as a result, our young people no longer have self-esteem. They would rob you, they would rob me, because they are stressed out and they see no hope. And when we were growing up, we had in the community plumbers, electricians, bricklayers, all of the trades were there. And if you didn't have a job, you could work for yourself. And in 1967, I graduated from high school. And in 1967, according to the FBI, there were 15 murders in Washington, D.C. In 1987, there were 550. It jumped from 15 to 550. And you can check the records, but most of the people who were arrested had no skills, none whatsoever. So my statement, and I'll turn it over to the next speaker today, but my position is that the mayor and the city council should resign if they do not reopen trade and vocational schools, because the majority of children in America are not going to go to college. That's the 10% that goes to college. The majority are looking for employment and looking for a way to make a living. Thank you.
Thanks. I got involved in environmental justice because I'm sort of I guess a stereotypical nature boy. Have really just a strong kind of a spiritual and emotional connection to nature, and especially forested areas. One of the special things about DC, it's sometimes been called the City of Trees, and there's a worldwide pattern of well-planned and thought out parklands being concentrated in more affluent areas, and working class and poor areas tend to not have quality green space. DC is in some ways an exception to that. Many of the toughest and most divested, marginalized neighborhoods in DC are actually bordering some very extensive and very beautiful forested lands that were added to the national park system in most cases more than 100 years ago. However, there's a huge disparity if we look at how those public lands are maintained or not maintained, the degree of recreational access and amenities that exist. So I have this reverence for nature, but also this revulsion for how pollution, and in the case of our urban forest, we have to see a lot of trash pollution, and also invasive species that mar the beauty and the health of those forests and undermine the ecological services that they can serve. For example, they soak up water to mitigate flooding. They break up heat islands and provide shade to mitigate against extreme heat. They clean the air. All of these things are, the forest is not able to do so well when the ground is covered in trash and the trees are being smothered by invasive vines. So I saw a need for what the National Park Service, owner of most of that land, was not doing. The DC government, owning other portions, wasn't doing any better. And so I decided to take that on with the help initially of volunteers and later with our Park Steward program that provides employment opportunities for east of the river residents who have barriers to employment. Most of them are returning citizens. And that's what we've been doing the last 5 years. We've removed 1.2 million pounds of trash. And we've cut invasive vines from about 5,600 trees. And now we're trying to take a closer look at what we can do to actually stop trash pollution before it happens.
This is Brenda. I am an eco-feminist and have been involved in environmental justice for the past 30 years. And I got involved because I kept finding myself asking the question, what about us? Especially those of us who live east of the river. And it seemed like when it came to environmental issues, because APAC is focusing on climate change issues, it always seems that Ward 7 and Ward 8 always gets hit the greatest, but are the last to receive resources and funding to mitigate any problems. I'm just reminded we had a heat sensitivity meeting in Washington Highlands, a public housing development, and we're looking at the correlation between heat sensitivity and violence. And it was just astonishing to hear what folks had to say. But more importantly, the folks in this particular community did not have air conditioning units. And one of the tenants shared that it was so hot in her unit that her smoke detector was going off. So APAC is working very diligently to figure out how to work with DOEE to ensure that this time next year, because I understand it's only going to get hotter, how this time next year, anybody in a disfavored community who needs an air conditioning unit will be able to get one. Thank you.
And this is Rhonda Hamilton, and I became involved in environmental justice similar to you all experiences, just out of genuinely want to help my community and realizing that we have been so drastically impacted by the pollutants through the industrial uses over the decades within Buzzard Point, and realizing that we were not receiving a lot of help and support from the city in particular to make sure that the health and the well-being of our community was protected as the area is being redeveloped. Our dust was being thrown everywhere. And this is contaminated dust with fugitive dust with all sorts of things that could damage your systems, your health, and seeing so many of my neighbors die over the years. I began to learn through other environmental researchers and people who understood environmental justice, the connections between those toxic chemicals and why they were having such drastic impacts on our health and basically killing us. And so that's why I became involved just out of generally wanting to help our community, wanting to save lives, wanting to protect lives. But we felt like we were in the battle alone, and we were fortunate to have the support of partners and individuals that care and other community members that rally together. But it's so unfortunate that communities like mine have had to suffer these environmental injustices. And for me, environmental justice means equality across the board. It means the ability of us to be able to breathe clean air, to not live beside industrial facilities that poison our air. It means for the ability for us to enjoy trees and exercise without having dust and diesel fumes and everything, to really enjoy and have a quality of our lives and be able to thrive, for our kids not to be able to be like forced to stay inside their homes because of different respiratory ailments and different things that are impacting them. So for me, environmental justice means us having to have a healthy and thriving community and the supports and environmental protections that we need to ensure that we are not continuing to have negative health consequences from all of these industrial facilities.
Thank you, panelists. Thank you for sharing these stories with us. Your passion does not go unnoticed. This is a lifelong fight, and your dedication, it does, as I mentioned, does not go unnoticed. I wanted to kind of start this session with hearing from you first, so you could share those stories with us, and then I will now move into the session description so folks can get an understanding of what we can expect within this session from our panelists. In recent years, the nation's capital has confronted distinctive environmental justice challenges encompassing issues such as air pollution hazards, illicit dumping in Anacostia Park, and coastal flooding. Additionally, Washington, D.C. has been grappling with one of the nation's most pronounced rates of gentrification and wealth disparity. Consequently, resource allocation and climate mitigation efforts in the district have primarily favored more affluent neighborhoods, leaving many BIPOC or Black, Indigenous, people of color, and low-income communities marginalized. The problem of transportation injustice is also pervasive, with low-income and communities of color more reliant on public transportation, yet lacking sufficient transit infrastructure. Simultaneously, they are exposed to industrial activity primarily situated in their neighborhoods, as seen in places like Ivy City and Buzzard Point. These issues have contributed to a significant life expectancy gap of 15.6 years across the 8 wards, and disparities in adults reporting asthma, with the highest rate at 23.4% in Ward 8, followed by 15.3% in Ward 6, among other health disparities documented in the Health Equity Report for the District of Columbia. This session aims to deeply explore the pressing matters surrounding environmental justice concerns in DC, delving into the compounded effects of environmental and societal inequities, We will draw insights from representatives spanning from Ward 5 to Ward 8, as well as environmental justice leaders associated with grassroots organizations such as Empower DC, NAIR Buzzard Point Resilient Action Committee, Anacostia Parks and Committee Collaborative, and Ward 8 Woods. These speakers will address ongoing environmental justice challenges affecting Washington, D.C., shed light on the social factors that disproportionately impact underserved communities, highlight the efforts undertaken to tackle these challenges, and propose potential pathways for progress in the foreseeable future. And now I want to ask panelists if you can elaborate on the role of segregation and redlining in public policy and how this has shaped the riskscape of DC today.
I can start. We all know that parts of DC were redlined. Ivy City is 150 years old this year, and Ivy City was built to be predominantly a Black community, working class community. Now through the gentrification, it seems like it's a reverse redlining. We're getting pushed out of our homes and out of the communities that we can afford and grow up and that we grew up in, and they are turning them into entertainment zones. Not only entertainment zones, but they're bringing in businesses that we don't patronize. There are a few businesses in Ivy City that we can't even afford to go to. So with that, some of our communities doing redlining, such as Brentwood, Ivy City, and some of Deanwood, they were predominantly Black. So when there was redlining, Blacks couldn't live everywhere. Now it's getting to the point where we can't live anywhere. And then what was going on, the developers, they're aware of how the district agencies, how the political the officials, the elected officials in DC, they're aware that, yeah, the mayor wants so much of this housing and they call it affordable. Who is it affordable for? You have to make six figures in order to afford to live in some of the neighborhoods that we used to call the hood, or just an affordable community. Now it's getting to the point where we have slumlords flipping these apartment buildings that were affordable. At one time, you can live in them for less than $700 a month. Now they're $1,500 for a studio with no bike rack and no parking. So I'm just saying it's a reverse redlining now, because everything is getting to the point where we can't afford to even live in the city. And then on top of that, they poison us for years with these polluting industries, and we're yelling and screaming about it and being ignored. But then once the table changes, or once the table turns, and then you get a lot of different cultures into the communities, white cultures, I'll say that, I'll put that out there, then they start saying, oh, we don't want this here, and it's gone just like that. And here we are dying. We've been dying and still dying and getting sick. So I'll leave it at that.
Yes, and I'll just follow up on what you said, but I'll just take a little different twist. Kingman Park is the neighborhood that's directly next to Capitol Hill, if that helps for people who are not familiar with the area. Kingman Park was always an African American community. It was a middle class African American community. It was built for African Americans because they couldn't buy houses in other parts of the city. There's only one golf course in the United States of America that was built for African Americans by the United States government, and that is the Langston Golf Course, which is in the neighborhood. Now we have a neighborhood that is multiracial. It's thriving because it's always been middle class. But now the problem is when my parents bought the house cost $13,500, $13,500. The house is assessed now at $650,000. So a lot of capital gains there. But if I were to sell, but the problem is that as Ron was just saying, the neighborhood is changing. That's fine because things do change. But the problem is we don't have the income for lower income people to maintain and be able to stay in these neighborhoods. That's the crime. That's literally a crime because people, everybody, I don't care what color you are, you got to live somewhere. But if you're not giving everybody an equal opportunity at having a fair job, a fair place to be employed, then that's the crime. So what we see now, we take the position, and I can tell you this, Kingman Park Civic Association has never taken one dime from the District of Columbia government. We've been offered all kinds of money, but we refuse to do it. They even call us Republicans. We're not, but we don't take the city's money. The city is a democratic city. And because once you take their money, you're kind of beholden to them. So we say how we feel, and we take that position. And if you look at the schools along the Anacostia, along Bennings Road, you have a college campus, really. It looks like a college campus. It was built in the appearance of a college campus. Many of the schools look like some of the buildings on this campus right here at the University of Maryland. So the problem that we see is that there's a big fight looming. And the big fight is whether we build houses, expensive houses, $1 million houses along the Anacostia River, which would be a terrible, terrible thing, or whether we lobby to build a stadium. And we've been in the neighborhood long enough to tell you that we know that the only ones who are going to get in, train young people, because they're going to need the labor unions, the employment, the jobs that will come after that. People in my neighborhood worked at RFK Stadium. They were attendants in the parking lots, ticket sales, popcorn sales, beer sales, everything. It created jobs. And so it is our position. We have to go back to that because the city is not going to do it. They have never done it, and they're not going to do it. It's not going to be a catalyst from downtown. And if you're going to fight the city, and I can tell you, we've been down that road. I'll tell you this. We've been down that road. Brenda Richardson, who's on the panel, hello, Brenda. We filed a lawsuit against the city, a group, the Anacostia Watershed Society, the Kingman Park Civic Association, and several other groups. We filed against the United States Navy and against the city for the cleanup of the Anacostia River. They settled with us for $3 million. This was in the 90s. That began the cleanup of the Anacostia River. We've been in many, many lawsuits since that time. And Earth Justice has done a great job assisting us. They're environmental law firm. They work tirelessly at going against the government. So what we see is negotiations. You can't sue these big corporations. I was going to call them fat cats, but I'll call them big corporations. You can't sue them without wanting to negotiate with them because that's politics. The people downtown don't play politics. They play, I want to keep my job. And if we don't bring in business and negotiate with them on the cleanups of the river. They have pledged to build a new river wall along the Anacostia River. They would have to have it, because if you put a stadium there, you're going to have a new river wall to deal with the overflow, to deal with tidal flows. All of this is going to come from investment in the community, and we want to keep our community. People are moving into our community in droves because it's always been a strong community, and without the negotiations, and you don't have to be a lawyer to negotiate, you just have to have ideas. And when the city council doesn't want to do it, when Jack Kent Cooke, who used to own the football team in the city, when he came, Jack Kent Cooke was determined he was going to build a stadium, and we were determined a second stadium. We were opposed. We were not opposed to a stadium. We were opposed to two stadiums. He wanted to put one next to the other one. We said no. He said yes. And we worked with Congress, Senator Lighthorse Campbell from Colorado, who was a Native American. Senator Campbell said, I'll join you because I've been talking with Mr. Cooke and he doesn't want to change the name of the team. And I want the name of the team changed. And so we formed these coalitions without one dime. We had no money. And we can still do that. It doesn't take the money, because the money will spoil you. I'll tell you, I'm here to tell you, the money will spoil you. And once the money begins, you begin with a big organizational and administrative body, and if everyone has to get paid, and everybody's worried about whether that check is going to come through. So I say again, we marched on the city council. We have to get back with that in the public schools. The young people have to be taught what the movement is. They have to be taught, because that's the missing link. It may take another 5 to 10 years, but they're going to mature and they'll understand that when the politicians don't act, they have to confront them. Thank you.
At Ward 8 Woods, we deal a lot with trash pollution, and that can be a tough issue because a lot of people litter, and it can be easy to blame people who are poor and marginalized in a lot of ways for causing the trash pollution. But we have to look at it structurally. Why is it that almost everywhere you go in the world, the poorer neighborhoods are the ones where they have trouble managing trash, and in the wealthier ones, it's always a lot cleaner? Well, one thing that's kind of unique to DC is where your trash goes depends on whether you live in a house or an apartment. Under DC law, if you live in a house or a duplex, a property with 3 units, the city comes and picks up your trash once a week. In some neighborhoods where the alleys are very older neighborhoods where the alleys are really narrow and the trucks have to be smaller, they actually do it twice a week. But for the most part, that's what they do, and it's free. It's paid for with your taxes. If you need to get rid of a mattress or a refrigerator or a sofa, you submit a request through the 311 system. The city gives you a date, usually a week or 2 later, for when to put it out. You put it out, they pick it up, it's free, no problem. If you live in any property with more than 3 units, any apartment building, your waste disposal is not covered by the city. You are at the mercy of your landlord. And so the same landlords who don't want to maintain the building because they don't want to spend the money, will save money by skimping on waste disposal. So you might have 20 units and 1 dumpster that was designed for a 4-unit building. So what happens? It's emptied once a week. A day or 2 later, it's overflowing. The trash is going all over the place. The rats are coming in. So what are people supposed to do with their trash? It's not surprising that some people will say, well, I'm just going to put it in that trash can that's out on the street in front of the building. And then DC Public Works says, oh, the residents are misusing the trash cans by putting household trash. We're going to remove the trash can. And then what are you supposed to do with your trash? Some people will even say, well, I don't want it right next to my car or my front door, but there's some woods behind the building. If I throw it off the balcony and over the fence into the woods, at least it'll be kind of a little bit out of sight, out of mind. And that's what people do. And then DC Public Works refuses to hold the landlords accountable for that. You talk to the landlords, they'll just blame the tenants. And say, well, maybe if you actually made it possible for the tenants to dispose properly of their trash, this wouldn't happen. So that's some of what we're dealing with. You know, with gentrification, a lot of houses are being renovated, rehabbed, gutted. Some of these contractors are very unscrupulous, so they will come in and tear everything out, the drywall, the tiles, everything up to and including the kitchen sink. And to save money, the money that it would take to actually haul that stuff up to the transfer station and pay, they say, oh, there's some woods down around the corner. Nobody's paying attention. Let's dump it all down there. And they know that they can get away with it because of the neighborhood that it's in and the fact that nobody's paying attention. So that's some of what we are dealing with and some of the advocacy that we're doing to try to plug those gaps in enforcement and regulation. And we're hoping we can make some progress on that legislatively within the next couple of years.
So
Because
this is
nobody should have to
Brenda.
live surrounded by trash.
This is Brenda, and I want to speak to what Frazier shared. And Frazier, it's an honor to be on this panel with you. I appreciate your history and everything that you've done for community over the years. I just want to talk about swimification and gentrification in parks. And one of the things that we've discovered at APAC is that, you know, when the landscape in the community changes, then we find that the newcomers are able to accomplish things much faster than those of us who've been showered with disfavor for so long. And I'll give you an example in Oxen Run Park. The Friends of Oxen Run Park has been trying to get public restrooms in the city's largest park in their inventory for the past 5 years. They still don't have a public restrooms, and it would only cost about $2,500 to get public restrooms in this park. But new folks moved into the community and were able to get $1 million dog park. And we were like, well, Black folks have had dogs for years and never needed a dog park. And now we're getting $1 million dog park, but we can't get public restrooms. So it's okay for the dogs to poop, but it's not okay for the people who've lived in the community to go to the park and do the same thing in a public restroom. And also this whole thing with the Anacostia River, that is such an important river. And this goes back to what Frazier said. That is our river too. And what happens is when you put in these boardwalks and these river walks, we like to drive to where we're going. Many of us like to drive to where we're going. We can go to Anacostia Park, park our cars, go to the pavilion, go to the swimming pool, go fishing. But when you have a boardwalk or a river walk, it's a totally different kind of thing for our community. And they're having this splash next week. And I'm just like, so what does that mean? Do people who live in Ward 7 and Ward 8, where the part where you can get into the river from the bank, are we going to still have access? How many of us are going to be able to swim in the river if we can't swim? That's another thing. I can't swim. I'm terrified of the water, but it's something that I have to work on. But I think this whole thing with racial equity, I think it's important our mayor has a racial equity officer. I think it's incumbent upon all environmentalists and ecofeminists to make sure that racial equity does indeed exist. Otherwise, we're just going to be erased from communities that we suffered through and never had the opportunity to enjoy the reward. So I stand ready to join everybody on this panel, to be supportive. I've worked with Rhonda. When Rhonda calls, I come, because I think it's important for us not to only preserve our community, but to preserve our culture, because we deserve it too. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for your comments, Ms. Brenda, Frazier, and Commissioner Rhodes. It's an honor to be on the panel with you all as well. I'm so glad that you touched on some of the important things, especially how our youth feel and how people feel that's within our community. As a lot of people know, in Southwest history, during Urban Renewal, there were 20,000 plus African Americans that were forced out of the community. And they went into parts of Ward 7, parts of Ward 8, different communities that they invested in and helped to build up and to strengthen. And now, even in our community, it makes people feel like we're on borrowed time as residents in public housing. We're going through the brunt of everything that's going on, all of the pollution, the traffic, all of the things that the city agencies with the parks, like Ms. Brenda mentioned, putting in the different dog parks and putting in bicycle lanes and all of these things. We have to deal with all of the construction, all of the impacts, all of the inconveniences of those changes. And then at the end of the day, we're viewed as like, why are you still here? We don't feel welcome. We're pushed out and priced out. And then everything is built up and designed around us, but we don't often receive an opportunity to be at the table. We don't receive the funding sources to help us sustain our community. So I just can only imagine how the youth feel that are coming up with these in these areas, the families feel, the seniors feel. They don't feel like they're wanted and welcome in their own communities. They feel like the priority is not them, it's other people that come and live through the gentrification that are new to the area that, like Ms. Brenda said, they get the grants and the opportunities and we're left behind. And it's just very unfortunate. That shouldn't be the case. Our areas are often so under-resourced. We don't receive a lot of the things that our families need to make sure that they can sustain themselves. And I feel like it's so unfortunate because DC has some of the strongest communities in the city. As a people, we have built up those communities. We have stood in those communities through thick and thin, through all the difficulties within these communities. And at the end of the day, it's like, we're still not a priority. Our concerns are still not important as far as what they're going on, that they're not a priority. And so I just feel like it's important that we do have a seat or opportunity to be at the table. I feel like it's important that our voices, they deserve to be heard, and we deserve better for our communities, especially for our children.
Thank you, panelists. At this point, I'm going to ask one more general question, and then we move into specified. So this question gives a little background to our audience. So bear with me, it is a bit long. All wards in DC have seen an increase in overall life expectancy to 79 years overall for the district as a whole. However, there has been an increase in the gap across the 8 wards to 15.6 years. Neighborhood level data has shown an even wider gap between Woodley Park, where life expectancy is 89.4 years, and St. Elizabeth's, where life expectancy was just 68 years. There is a gap of 21 years across the district. The major neighborhoods where life expectancy exceeds the district average are to the north and northwest. How has environmental injustices created these massive spatial gradients in life expectancy?
Well, just like the chemical plant that's in Ivy City, is no way that would be in Woodley Park for almost 100 years. And I'm gonna leave that at that.
Speak on it.
This is Brenda. I think that is shameful to be able to report something that has such a stark gap. And I think that there is this intersection between environmental injustice and our health. And I think it has a lot to do with our air quality and how you often find more highways in disfavored communities than you find anywhere else. And as a result of that, when you're experiencing, I talked to an oncologist once, and he said, dis-ease creates disease. Dis-ease creates disease. So if you've got poor air quality on the outside of your home. And then you're dealing with poor indoor quality because of those of us that have gas stoves and the problems that it causes in our home. Of course, we're going to be more subjected to the health disparities than anybody else. But my question is, whose responsibility is it to do something about it? You know, we watch the health disparities in Ward 7 and 8, they escalate. Ward 8 has the highest breast cancer rate, not in the city, but in the region. And it's been like that for several years. But we've got respiratory problems east of the river. But who's stopping to say, we won't take this anymore? We've got to do something about it. We as a people, we deserve to live to be 100 years old if we want to. But because of our zip code, that's going to determine our life expectancy. Shame on our government for allowing something like that to happen, because we don't deserve it. And again, I asked the question as it relates to this life expectancy, what about us? We matter. Our environment has to be cleaner because we matter. And I think that I think it has a lot to do with our collective trauma. I'm so grateful for everybody on this panel, because Rhonda and I have had a conversation where sometimes we're just tired because we've experienced so much collective trauma. And oh, don't let me forget the pandemic and how it contributed to a more sedentary lifestyle in disfavored communities. And that just exacerbated our life expectancy and our health disparities. But I'm so grateful that we have the opportunity to have this conversation, because we have to band together to do something about it, because it's not okay for poor people and those that are showered with disfavor to die because we can't control what goes on in our environment outside of our home and inside of our home. And I'm saying that to everybody because we all have an opportunity to shower Fraser's community, Nathan's community, Rhonda, the ANC commissioner, my community with favor. But we can't shower our communities with favor by ourselves. We need help. Thank you.
Yeah. And if I could just quickly address that, I won't hold you up long. But one of the major differences in the mortality tables and life expectancies, as I see it, is of course money. And if you are Upper Connecticut Avenue, you have very wealthy people. No problem with that. Here's the problem. The problem is that in wards 6, 7, and 8, in particular, not so much 6, it's got quite a few wealthy people, but some parts of it does not. But I can easily go back because I'm one of the older people in this room. And I can tell you that when we had professional teams on this side of the city, on the east side, you all are probably, most of you are too young to probably know some of the athletes that worked every day in Ward 7 and Ward 8. We had Chuck Hinton. He played for the Washington Senators baseball team. Chuck Hinton had an insurance company that he opened up. He made big money. He opened up an insurance company on 8th Street. We had Bobby Mitchell. He invested in a bar on Bennings Road because these guys came to the neighborhood every day. This was a part of their work environment. The problem that we're having is that we don't have enough of these big money people coming into the community. And if we did, they created jobs. His insurance company had 4 or 5 employees. The bar had numerous people, not to speak of the patrons that came. So what we're seeing is that the city government, in my opinion, does not know how to negotiate. They don't know what to do. They're busy bringing in condos, condos, condos. That's all they know. And the investors in condos don't live in the neighborhood. That's the problem. They don't live in your neighborhood. So that has to stop, because you're bringing in all this additional pollution, traffic, sewage. We have flooding in the neighborhoods. It's the greed that comes with it, and not the human factor. If the human factor came into the equation, then you would see a change.
Absolutely. And speaking on pollution, and Brenda, you mentioned air quality. This question is for Rhonda and Sabrina. What are some challenges and lessons learned from the hyperlocal air quality monitoring projects in DC, both in Buzzard Point and Ivy City? And what are some future directions?
Rhonda, you want to start?
Yes, I would like to say, I will never forget, because we have a monitor that Department of Energy and Environment put in years ago at King Greenleaf Rec Center. And I remember clearly when we were, as a community, was pushing for that air monitor to be placed in Buzzard Point. We didn't get it. We didn't have input, or our input wasn't listened to really place it in the heart of Buzzard Point, but it was placed over the King Greenleaf Rec Center. And while we were thankful to have the monitor, I never forget when we were discussing the air monitor, they were very concerned that Southwest was going to bring down the air quality readings, in terms of them seeing the results of how polluted our air was, in us bringing down the numbers. And so I just really couldn't believe that. I'm like, y'all scared to put a monitor in, really? Because you're worried that the numbers will come down when they see how contaminated our air is. And so we have, done through Dr. Shea at Trinity, and working with Power, have a monitor devices that we installed, that was installed within our community in Southwest Gardens. So we have been monitoring our own air through the partnership for the past several years, even prior to the soccer stadium. But we have not had been successful in getting monitors set up at the cement plant. First, we had Vulcan, now we used to have Superior and Vulcan. We have not succeeded in getting a monitor in real time that is actually set up in the heart of Buzzard Point, which will have had a stronger impact. And I feel like with our air quality monitor, we push construction companies to have those monitors in place. Before their projects, when they're doing projects over contaminated soil, we push for the bridge to have monitors in, which came well after the fact. But I feel like we have to push tooth and nail to get these air monitors to happen. And then when it happens, it's like the monitors come in temporarily, except for the Greenleaf monitors. We don't get those stationary real-time air monitors, so we know what the air quality is and what is contributing to the poor air quality. And I feel like that disservices the community, because our lived experiences, what we go through every day, having to struggle to breathe, to deal with all the climate change issues, all of the construction dust, it feels like you're in a war zone within your own community, and your body is fighting to address those contaminants and to adjust to them and to just simply breathe. But it feels like, as far as the air quality monitor, it's well behind the times. It's not situated the way it needs to be in a community to improve the air quality. And I just don't understand why. Why don't we have monitors throughout that the Department of Energy and Environment puts within Buzzard Points, so that real mitigation steps can be taken to improve the air quality on an hourly basis? So it's just hard, because we shouldn't be at this point. We deserve environmental justice. We deserve clean air. We deserve the things put in place to help with our air quality. And we are just not getting those consistently.
Thank you, Rhonda.
Thanks, Rhonda. In Ivy City, the challenge, first of all, I just want to say I want to thank Zooks here, Shizuka, professor at Trinity. Sh- She's been testing our air since 2014. And the data, when DOEE tested of the chemical plant last year, they hired an outside contractor and did 3 testing dates. And what they found was some high levels of formaldehyde and methylene chloride. And if anybody know, I had to do research. These are cancer causing chemicals. It was only 3 days. And they're going to tell us, well, it was only 3 days, so it didn't do much to the community. But this place is been operating since the 30s, almost 100 years. So that's almost 100 years, and they still operating to today. While now that EPA has come into the community and they have these canisters set up, we have some residents that are hosting some of the canisters. Also on our business side of the community, there are the canisters. So they're going to be doing a 6-month testing. We also had the Acclima car, which DOEE sponsored for 2 weeks, drive around and do some data. We already know that Ivy City is an urban heat island. We get 10 to 20 degrees hotter. We already know that this chemical plant is poisoning us. We already know that our air is unbreathable. Where I work, Empower DC has a pretty much like a hub in Ivy City, and we have a purple air monitor, and Zooks bought the black carbon monitor. During the fires, the Canadian fires, our air quality was 403. So that's way off the charts. It's not even purple or burgundy. I believe it's heading towards black. And when it gets worse, like the chemical plant, you smell burning tar every day. And then to have DOEE explain to everyone that they have monitors, but they have to pick a monitor for this certain toxin. Their monitors are not sensitive enough to pick up everything and isolate it from its source. So when they gave us the results this February, actually it took 8 months, and it shouldn't have took that long for us to get the results of this test. They telling us what they didn't find, which is crazy. And no, I don't want to hear what you didn't find, and I don't want to hear what the lowest scientific data or the lowest, yes, thank you, the safe level with another industry or another organization. And I knew it. I had did some research, and I knew they was going to do that, and they did it in a public meeting. So this is the challenges that we're dealing with, and they're talking to community and community members that they feel like don't know any better. So and as an ANC commissioner, it's extra hard because everyone is under the umbrella of the mayor. So whatever she says, it goes, and whatever she don't want around, it's not around. So a lot of the agencies, they are watching what they say and how they say it. So they don't want the data to come out. Because why? Because the district has been negligent. How are we going to fight that? With what tools and what weapons? How are we going to say that? And I ain't talking about weapons. I'm just saying, how are we going to deal with the agencies like the water company? We need our water tested because, as far as we're concerned, our water is toxic, including our air and including our soil. So, as ANC commissioner, when I asked for tests for water, soil, we already getting our air tested, but for the water and soil, I shouldn't hear crickets. That should be a given. That should have already been in the plans. And actually, this chemical plant shouldn't even be in the community. It shouldn't even be in the nation's capital. It's the only one that's in DC that has all these that uses all these chemicals, and they're operating with only a certificate of occupancy, no air quality permit. So, and those are challenges when you have businesses that feel like they can just slide on in DC and just set up shop in our communities and continue to operate. Mind you, this chemical plant operated for 8 months without a business permit. And then when we yelled and screamed about it, all of a sudden they went to Department of Licensing and got a permit just like that within a month. No questions asked. So basically they're putting these businesses before the community, and they're putting them before our lives, because mind you, a lot of the people that work at these agencies and these industries, like Brother Frazier said, they don't live in our communities. They just set up shop and they just do business and they want our money.
If I could just jump in real quick, as Empower DC and others are fighting to eliminate these sources of air pollution in the city, we know that one of the best ways to clean our air and mitigate air pollution is with trees. And the mayor and the Office of the Environment, they, have all this nice rhetoric about how we're going to plant trees and we're going to increase the tree canopy. And they have invested a lot in planting new trees. The problem is they've invested almost nothing in preserving the trees that we already have. Within the forested areas, we have thousands of trees that have died and are dying because they're being smothered by invasive vines. And, in 10 minutes, I can save a 100-year-old tree by cutting the vines off of it. And that's a lot cheaper than trying to raise a new tree from a seed and, plant it and water it and wait 100 years for it to get big enough so that it can have the amount of water soaking and air cleaning and shade providing services that the 100-year-old tree did. But we're just not investing in that. The assumption is if it's wooded, it's going to stay that, doesn't need any maintenance, just leave it alone, it's in the bank. But what we have increasingly are big gaps in the canopy within what used to be a forest, but is now just sort of like a meadow that's covered in kudzu or porcelainberry or whatever the invasive vine was that killed and pulled all the trees down. And to do that, we're gonna need a big investment to remove that stuff and then to plant new trees. But because most of our forests are controlled by the National Park Service, they won't let you plant trees unless you do an archaeological study first. And not to discount the history of what's happened on that land, but they want to charge $500 per tree to hire a contractor to do an archaeological study before you can plant the tree. That's prohibitive. At that rate, we're never going to be able to reforest our destroyed forests. And then what's worse is that on private land, the owners are being allowed to just clear cut large areas of mature trees to make way for new development. And in 2021, the council adopted what was supposed to be one of the strongest tree protection laws in the country. Before you can cut down trees, you have to call the city forester and they have to look at it and measure the tree. And then based on the size of the tree, they don't tell you can't take it out. They don't fine you if you take it out, but as a condition of receiving the permit to take it out, you have to pay a fee. And these fees are big enough that if I'm a homeowner and I'm afraid that the tree is going to fall on my house and I want to take it out, I can't pay $10,000 to get the permit to take it out. But if I'm building a $20 million condo building and you want to say, oh, I have to pay 30,000 in fees for those trees, I'm going to spend more than 30,000 on, floor tiles or whatever. It's just another cost. So it's not really a deterrent. It's just a way of getting revenue. That revenue is supposed to be used to plant new trees, but we're running out of space to plant trees on the street. And the private areas that were wooded are turning into buildings, and we're losing canopy. And that's just compounding the air quality problems that we're already having.
I want to add to that. If you all don't know, there's the New York Avenue Vision Framework. New York Avenue is about to be a metropolis, and it will be into your best interest to join these meetings and be part of the planning of New York Avenue. And one thing that we're stressing, because Ivy City is an urban heat island, is to have tree canopy. Shade trees, not little bushes that are 3 feet. We need shade trees, colorful trees, pretty trees, because that's the corridor when folks are coming in town.
For sure.
So, and plus we have a very large homeless population, unhoused population. A lot of times people are looking for trees to get shade from the sun, which is beaming on us on 100 every day during the summer. So trees are helping us get through, at least when we are walking through the community. So the New York Avenue Vision Framework, please get involved with that. Look into that website, and when you have a chance, join those meetings. But we have developers, like you said, Nate, are cutting trees down, and I'm almost like the tree police, because we have old, probably 100-year-old trees, and some of them have ivy that's growing around them. We don't care about the ivy. We just care about the tree, because we need trees in our community and we don't want them cut down. So a developer decided to cut the whole tree down. And I called the council member and I'm like, these people are crazy. We need our trees. And last summer we talked to someone from Urban Forestry who's a resident in Ivy City, and they was letting us know, okay, invasive trees can get cut down because they're destroying the property, destroying the land. But good trees, a developer has to report to DDOT's Urban Forestry that they want a tree cut down and have to get a permit. So they will just cut it down. They'll cut it down and then pay the fine, and the fine can be as high as $50,000.
Well, it's not really a fine. It's just a fee that you pay before you get the permit. Now, if you cut without having a permit, there is a larger fine. There was a case in Ward 7 of somebody who poisoned the tree so that it would look like it was dead, so that they could cut it down without paying the fee. But they got caught and they had to pay even more. But my point was the fees are actually not high enough to be a deterrent. They're just being treated as a source of revenue that can be used to plant new trees, but it's not a fair exchange, because those trees the new trees take too long to grow.
This has been, honestly, I hate to even interject, because we're now getting into the juice of things. We are at time, but we did start late. So at this moment, I think we can maybe have some short closing points and open the floor up to 1 or 2 questions. So any of our panelists have some closing points? If not, I will ask the audience 1 or 2 questions. If anyone has 1 or 2 questions to ask, I should say. Okay. And we're going to need you to speak into the mic so people on YouTube can hear.
Can I be real, or you want me to be like polite and formal?
You could be
Word.
real.
I think everyone in the room is on the same page. And look, I'm an alum from Maryland. I went to undergrad here. I was pre-med, and then I was like, nah, fuck that. I'm not doing that shit anymore. And I've been doing music and dance and design stuff since then. And I've been trying to get involved in being more involved in community stuff around DC, especially too. How do how do you all see I don't know how else to say it, like artists contributing to like the vision that you're all discussing? Because like I have some ideas for that, but none of it's formal or like respectful to the people in charge, and most of it involves like being noisy as fuck and like keeping it real.
Yeah, let's keep the cursing to a minimum. This is being streamed.
I asked.
Real doesn't necessarily mean cursing, but please proceed.
That's how I'm real. And so how do you all see just people in general contributing to what you're saying?
Join an organization. Join an organization. Empower DC is one of the biggest organizations in the district. Join an organization and put your tennis shoes on and work with the community. That's the biggest thing. We have a lot of artists that work with us. Don't just come around just when the cameras are clicking. Come around like Shakobi said. Come around when everybody broke, and be a voice and use your artistry to get it out, whether it's in rapping, painting, whatever is needed in the city.
As you just said, that you hit on a very important subject: the arts, music, painting, rapping, whatever. We're in Maryland here, and so I'm arguing against Maryland because I'm advocating for the district. But wherever they build a stadium, it's going to be a dome stadium. It's going to be year-round arts, year-round activities, money to be made. And, I just don't see our city government understanding that, because that's the very thing that will spur economic development and create new stars. And I can tell you, when RFK used to be there, you had everyone from the Beatles to the Grateful Dead to James Brown. All of the artists came there. And so we're talking about millions and millions of dollars, and not to speak of the smaller artists who were the opening acts. So you asked a very important question. That's all I can say.
Can I actually add to that too? Because I lead many projects here at Siege, but one of them is the Environmental Justice Podcast. And one of the episodes that are upcoming is actually art for environmental justice. And there actually are so many different streams and platforms of art that people are using to express their pain, their joy through environment, through their different channels of art. So I found some doing theater, some were playwrights, and then some were documentary makers, and then others were actually artists. And the name is actually escaping me right now, and I apologize, but there was an artist had put on a show in DC just recently, and it was for Latina voices, women and Latino Latinx communities within environmental justice spaces. So it's just, unfortunately, it's harder for arts to be heard, I think. So do the research as well. Do the research, and you can dig and really find. Because once I was doing the research, it was there. Yes, and we might have to be really quick. So yes, go right ahead with your question.
Okay.
Oh, Mike.
Very, very quickly. I'm bringing a health perspective to this. My organization helped bring in the first prenatal mobile unit some 20 years ago. And it was in response, not so much of prematurity, but low birth weight. and the lead in that area was Ward 5 because of the trash transfers and all of that was going on there. The city, there was a independent test, not a city test, independent. The George Avenue corridor and the Martin Luther King corridor had the highest asthma runs in the entire city. Okay, you can take it from there. Recently, not the city, but an organization was, and I was part of the organization that was awarded a grant from the first time from the CDC. Triple negative breast cancer is very high in this area. Started in DC, circling around in this area. Only 2 cities in the entire country was awarded this grant. So I'm just making you aware of the aspect of health and how it plays in the environmental issue because it plays a major role. One last thing, I look at health from a global perspective because if you're not looking at it from a global perspective, you're really missing a lot of things. According to the American Cancer Society, and they still say that it hasn't changed that much. 2 of the highest cities in the world with cancer is Nairobi, Kenya, and Washington, D.C. Now, I'll leave it at that. But remember, health plays a major role. Last thing, there's a saying, when a flower doesn't grow, you don't blame the flower, you blame the environment.
So with that being said, thank you, panelists. This was an extremely important conversation surrounding environmental justice issues within DC. I hope you all enjoyed the rest of the EJ and Health Disparities Symposium. I hope you have a good evening as well, and thank you for coming, and be safe.
I have some. If anybody's interested, I have some Ward 8 Woods literature and stickers to share. So I'm going to put those on the table.